Hello everyone and welcome to this video, which is in our Great Engine Game series. I'm Grandmaster Matthew Sadler and we are continuing our look at the CCCC 21 Blitz Challenger match between Torch and Leela. And actually a viewer asked me a little while back whether it would be possible to do a series on engine games in typical structures, like the isolated queen's pawn or hanging pawns or that sort of thing. And it's actually a very good idea. It'll take some preparation, so it's not happening right now. But I thought that this position from an IQP would be a nice little start to that. And actually it was very, very interesting indeed. So let's have a look. Torch is white, Leela is black. We'll show you the opening. It's not too far away and slightly unusual one, I have to say. So this is a Moran semi-Slav, and now instead of, after d takes c4, bishop c4, instead of playing b5, followed by either a6, or bishop b7, or even b4, or even bishop d6, that's quite modern, then black plays c5. Well, not too bad, and gets you into an IQP position. But of course, yeah, not the best possible version for black. You've played c5 in 2 moves. And also this knight has come to d7 rather than c6. So e takes d4, bishop e7, queen e2, castles, rook d1, knight b6, and now bishop b3. So what is this IQP for white? Well, it's a pretty good one, basically. Why is that? Well, first of all, you've got an extra tempo, which is always nice because black went c6 and then c5. But actually this setup is quite powerful for white. The reason for that is that the rook is actually able and willing to come along the third rank to g3 or h3. And the fact that black's knight is on b6, I mean, it's aiming for d5, which is a blockading square, that's fine. But normally, you know, if the knight's on c6, it can come into b4. Or if this bishop is active, could come to b7 or even to a6, then normally there's some sort of inhibitors to transferring a rook over that quickly. Whereas in this position that doesn't really exist. So actually white's chances of using that IQP to get a big kingside attack, pretty good really. Moreover, I mean, this knight's got a free outpost on e5. Sometimes the black knight's on d7. And you know, a knight can be exchanged when it comes to e5. Here, this isn't the case. So there's a lot of little things there for white which are working quite well. I mean, in general, in these positions, the key, you know, point to black having a decent position in an IQP is to get this light squared bishop on a good square. And at the moment, that's somewhat lagging behind. Now, yeah, it was quite interesting. In this game, Leela played the move a5, engines and rooks pawns, which is, yeah, I don't know. I find this a little bit slightly confusing move. I'm not quite sure. Well, you know, the point about it is that, you know, when you go a4, the bishop goes to c2, which is also a pretty good diagonal. So I am slightly wondering about the point of it. I mean, yeah, it does gain some queenside space. It gives you maybe the opportunity to play a3 and weaken the white queenside. But it's, yeah, I don't know. I'm not necessarily completely in awe of it somehow. I mean, I gave the engines an awful lot of possibilities. I mean, the most natural move to me, to be honest, was to play the move bishop d7. To play knight e5, bishop c6. This is quite common idea for black. The point is after knight c6, b takes c6. The d4 to d5 break is really stopped forever. Okay, you've got a weak pawn on c6, but stopping the d5 break and giving yourself a really solid outpost on d5 is not bad at all. The one problem with that is that white's got this possibility of rook d3 and then the rook's coming over to h3 later. Yeah, not 100% easy for black to deal with. For example, knight fd5, we go rook h3. And, well, we're already threatening stuff like bishop c2 and queen h5. What Stockfish wanted, and this was very impressive actually, was to play the move knight fd5. and meet knight e5 with bishop g5. I thought this was absolutely lovely. It's a slightly unexpected and unusual way of exchanging pieces, but by exchanging off the dark squared bishops, you're sort of reducing the attacking power that white can really generate against the king side, and this wasn't so bad. So this was dragon against stockfish. Queen coming back to d8. Now black plays a5 just to try and get this a5 to a4. Bishop c2, bishop d7, queen h3, g6, and black is definitely worse here. There are sort of weak dark squares. You've exchanged off your dark square bishop after all, and white's got some nice outposts for the pieces, but there's nothing really immediate. And stockfish, by using a few typical ideas, again, this bishop c6, not afraid of knight takes c6, b takes c6, knight e4, queen g7, and then bishop a4, swapping off the bishops. It was still uncomfortable, but black was kind of holding it together. White doesn't have any enormous attack there anymore. And I like this very much. I haven't seen this idea very often, well, not as quickly anyway, this bishop g5, but it seemed like a very sensible way to try and slow down the white initiative. It made me think as to whether maybe knight e4 would be best first, just to stop bishop g5 and then to play knight e5 after. It's also quite typical in the sort of IQP positions. Well, Leela played a5 and Torch played knight e5. And then this was very interesting as well. Leela played knight fd5, and I fear that this might be due to a little tactical oversight. What Dragon and Stockfish wanted was quite amazing, actually. It was a4, bishop c2, and then this move knight bd5. And what's the idea? Well, obviously you can't take on a4 with a bishop because of knight takes c3. So white takes with a knight on a4, and then you go b6, knight c3, bishop b7, and the engines are actually sort of carrying on as if nothing had happened, a pawn down. But what you do notice, it's exactly what I said before, that black's managed to get this bishop onto b7. The light squared bishop is developed. d5 is really held in a grip, in a vice-like grip. You can't do anything like rook d3 because we go bishop a6. So white's attacking possibilities are no longer there really. And black's got the standard play then in these IQP positions. You're playing rook c8. You're going to attack the knight on c3. You're just going to play normally. And you're a pawn down, okay, but white's got this pawn weakness on d4, and there's no big attacking chances. Really interesting idea, and although the engines lost quite a few games with this as black, it did not seem at all bad to me, I have to say. Stockfish managed to hold quite a few against Dragon. Dragon lost quite a few against Stockfish. The normal story. But a very interesting idea. What Leela did was play knight fd5. When I sort of wonder, was that a5 move really necessary? Played bishop c2, and now Stockfish again wanting something like bishop g5, for example, just to try and reduce white's attacking power on the king side by exchanging off the dark squared bishops. a5 not completely useful in this position, but okay, we'll do what we can with that. f6 was also a Stockfish idea. Seemed a little strange somehow, because after queen d3 you play f5, but the idea is that black's threatening knight b4, so white goes a3. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not 100% sure whether whether it's really been worth it getting the queen to d3 rather than e2. But carrying on with bishop f6, bishop b3, rook e8, rook e1, a4, bishop a2, and bishop d7. Black's willing to accept an isolated queen's pawn on d5 there, in order again to be solid and to keep the black attack, the white attack at bay. Not 100% great, I have to say, but yeah, again, black surviving, and you're just going to say, well, I'm worse, but at least I'm not getting mated. Again, quite interesting ideas. What Leela did was play bishop d7, and this was met by a pretty vicious Torch response, which is bishop takes h7 check. I mean, I actually had a game back in 1993 against Boris Avrukh, and from a Queen's Gambit accepted. Not quite this position. It's a mainline Queen's Gambit accepted, and Avrukh whipped out a bishop takes h7 at an unexpected moment against me. But I was pretty confident about these positions. I'd analysed them enormously, and I was pretty sure that it only led to a draw, and indeed it did. But this is always, a very dangerous idea. As soon as this knight leaves f6, these bishop takes h7 ideas are very dangerous when you've got the possibility of putting a rook to the third rank. And here this turns out to be really awkward. So king h7, rook d3, knight f6 to keep the queen out of h5, because rook h3 and queen h5 is coming in very, very fast indeed. So rook h3 check, king g8. And now queen d3. I mean, this looks quite slow for white. We're a couple of moves away from mating, but it's just very, very tough for black to do anything really on the king side. So the first idea is to go bishop g5 takes f6, and you can't actually go g6 here because knight g6 will follow. So what Leela does is pretty normal. Bishop e8, bishop g5, and then g6. So the bishop on e8 has supported g6, and we're covering the h7 mate by going g6. The only problem here is that with these pieces on here, the king's escape route away from g8 is blocked. So basically you're locked into the kill zone there, no possibilities for anything else. So queen g3 here from white, and the idea is simply to bring the queen over to h4 and give mate on h8 or h7 after bishop f6. And the big problem is that when you go queen h4 here, you can't move the knight to block with knight h5 because bishop takes e7. If you go something like queen d4, I'll most probably go rook d1, chase the queen away, and then come into h4. Again, just massive problems for black here. So what I was looking at one idea, which was to go knight c8. The idea being that if you go queen h4, I can go knight h5 and I'm covering the e7 bishop. But white just plays knight e4 in this position. Obviously, if knight e4, we go queen h4, and you can't stop me going queen h8. And if you do something like king g7, I just take and go queen f4 here. And just this threat of queen h6 is enormous. g5 allows the nice little finish, rook h7, takes, check. King h6, knight eg4, king g6, queen e4 check, and queen h7 checkmate. So all pretty nice for white. It's just very, very difficult for black to do anything. So what Leela came up with was knight h5. This allows rook takes h5, because after takes we go bishop f6, discovered check, and then queen g7 checkmate. But here black plays f6 now. And there's a lot of pieces hanging. And even d4 is hanging as well, if we just fancy a pawn. So white's got to find something, but this move rook h6 is very powerful. Obviously we're threatening g6, but we're also just threatening queen h3 followed by rook h8. This is the really big threat. So if you go f takes e6, I just go queen h3, and after bishop takes g5 I go rook check, queen h7, and after king f6 then rook f8 is going to be mate. So and if you go fe5, queen h3, you can go bishop f6 to try and stop rook h8, but then I go knight e4, and I'm just threatening knight f6 followed by rook h8. Yeah, incredible really, it's so powerful. So f takes g5 played, and now queen h3, threatening rook h8 check, and queen h7, and bishop f6. Black is still managing to cover this. Knight g6, bishop g6, rook g6, bishop g7, and now knight e4. And actually the engine's pretty much, after this bishop takes h7 sack, this is basically where the engines are ending up. And what can you say? It's white has still got an initiative, 2 pawns. but black is still a piece up here. The big problem is that tactically black's very vulnerable. We've got this one that's hanging with check. We've got knight g5 coming in with queen h7, and this knight on b6. This move a5. Why on earth did black play that? Is hanging. So there's a lot of unpleasant tactics here. But in actual fact, what we're tending to see is that we just end up in endings here. So queen takes d4, queen e6 check, rook f7, knight d6, queen f2, king h1. Obviously you can't give mate because you're pinned. Knight d7, we go rook takes g5, and after rook a6 we take, and go rook b5 here. And well, you go play a move like b6, we go g4, and for the engines this is just a clear win for white. Rook against knight and bishop with 2 pawns, 2 pass pawns, and well, the king in trouble, the piece is passive. You know, we just basically, by the time black's got itself organized, these pawns have already gone. So king e6, we go g5, bishop d4, h4, h5, rook f5, something like bishop b2, we go h6, rook f2, and then we start hitting the king, and you know, it's just very, very difficult for black. Some tactics required, of course, but we go rook f4 here, hitting the bishop on d4 and also threatening g6. The fact that this king is in the center in front of the pieces makes everything really difficult. And well, here Stockfish saw no better than rook h7, when after rook d4 then rook g7, rook g4. You know, white's just exchange up and winning. Complicated, but in general, you know, these sort of positions with rook and 2 pawns against knight and bishop, you know, like a flowing pawn structure, you know, just 2 pawn islands for white, and you know, pass pawns that can move very quickly. These are always very, very strong for the player with the rook and the 2 pawns. So Leela didn't go for that. Leela played rook f5, and now just a very strong move, g4. The big problem here is that this rook has to keep on covering g5, otherwise knight g5 happens. But after you go to d5, now we've got ideas like knight f6 check coming in. So rook c1, very good. You'll see how useful this rook on c1 is, eyeing the c7 square. Queen e7, and then knight f6 check. So white is actually offering black the opportunity to win that rook and knight. Well, give up the queen for rook and knight, but remain with rook and 2 pieces for the queen. You can't actually really avoid that, because if you go king f8, I go queen h7, and queen f7, which was really my thought. I was, you know, wondering a little bit, how do we finish this, because well, it looks like you're just threatening bishop f6. You might want to stop the video here just for a moment. You've got the stunning tactic, rook c7 here, queen c7. Of course, I've got queen g8 check, which is going to be terminal. And if you go something like knight, rook d7, for example, I just take, and rook f6 check. And if bishop f6, then queen d7. But queen f6 looks very reasonable. Rook f6, bishop f6. And well, this material balance, queen against rook and 2 pieces, is what I always, for me, it's always the Tal material balance, because you know, already in the 1960s, you know, Tal was demonstrating. There's a fantastic game against Oscar Pano, and another one also against Lajos Portish, Sacrifice, where I think that's the one where Tal played a speculative rook takes e6 against a Caro-Kann. But where Tal, you know, the point of Tal's combinations was to reach a queen against rook and 2 pieces position, but where the queen had great mobility, and the rook and 2 pieces were lacking stability, and also the opponent's king was open. And Tal really understood these positions very, very well, you know, and well, the engines, well, you see a lot of those as well. You know, you often see this sort of material balance being exploited by the engines. One of those things, I think, where Tal was, you know, like 50 years ahead of his time in terms of understanding. And this is the real problem, that you know, it's just very, very difficult here for black to coordinate the pieces and bring them together. So rook c3 here from Torch, coming into f3, very, very dangerous. Rook d4 played, rook f3, rook f4, queen h5 check, king f6 kind of forced there, and now rook f4 gf. And now Torch played the move h4. You've actually got a choice of how you want to do this. You can actually just go queen b5, queen b7, and then go h4, so pick up the pawn on b7 first and then start your pawns rolling. Or you can just play h4 like Torch did. Rook h8, queen g5 and queen f4, and we'll keep these pawns for little snacks later. King f7, h5, and yeah, again, to me, I understand that white's better in this position there because the black pieces are really not coordinating well, and pawns are open, and whenever your king is open as black, you're always going to suffer with the queen. But it's not an easy technical task, and of course Torch makes this look relatively simple, and I can tell you it's not. So bishop b2, queen f4, queen c7, and queen a5. Threatening a little queen b4 check here. So bishop e5 and king f1, just getting out of the way of any pins there. We're going to try and get in g5 somehow by hook or by crook. b6, queen d2, actually looking for h6 followed by g5. Rook f8 and now h6. Rook f4, g5. So those pawns are rolling, but yeah, black's got some pieces here. So knight f8, stopping the pawn moving from g6. I mean, in a blitz finish or whatever, I wouldn't be 100% confident about getting this. On the other hand, with black, I'd be pretty sure that I'd be losing a piece at some stage. Queen e3, hitting bishop on e5 and pawn on b6. Rook f5, a4, and what I find really impressive all the time about the ancients is how they're able to keep on trading advantages, because actually what Torch is looking for is to give up this pawn on g5, to trade it for the pawn on b6, and then just run with the a pawn. And obviously, pass pawns on the both extremities, that's quite hard for black's pieces to deal with, even if you do have rook and two pieces. So bishop h8. Queen takes b6, rook g5, queen b7, knight d7, queen b4 check, king f7, and now h7. Surprisingly hard for black to pick up that pawn without losing something else here. So rook h5 played, a5 now, and well, if you take on h7, a6, this is really dangerous. So knight c5, queen b5 to force the pawn through. Also pinning this knight now against the rook on h5. Bishop d4, a6, rook h7, a7. And actually, that pawn on a7 is going to cost black not a piece. It's going to cost black a whole rook. But there's still all sorts of tactics. Knight d7, queen f4 check, bishop f6. So this check has forced the bishop away from attacking the pawn on a7. So now king a7, queen e7, and queen b7. Lovely quiet move. And now there's no way for black to stop this. So rook a2, takes. Now it's still not completely obvious, that this should be a win for white. I mean, after all, knight and bishop against queen, that is a draw in some positions. There is one fortress position for black, but yeah, I guess you simply have to avoid that one, and then you're going to be fine. So let's have a quick look how Torch did it. So knight f8, queen a7, queen c5, knight g6, f4, king g7, king h2. Now you've got to be a little bit careful here, because if you were yeah, I mean, what you've got to avoid in terms of drawing positions is a position where black's bishop on g7 is, imagine that these pawns are gone, and the knight is on e5. That one, I believe, is a draw. Impossible for the white king to get close enough. But if you don't have exactly that, then it doesn't quite work. And well, quite interesting to see how close you can get to that position, but not quite be there, and the engines just think that it's winning. For example, after bishop g7, then we had Dragon playing this one. And you're really close to getting the bishop to g7 and knight to e5, but you just never quite make it. King g6, king f4. You can't get your bishop to g7, of course, because the queen is pinned there. Knight d3, knight e5. You're not quite getting it. Knight h6, queen d5, queen d3, queen h7, king f5. Once again, you're just not quite making it here. And bishop d8, queen h3, queen d3, queen e3, king g6. But you can see this is not an easy win. This is definitely rather tricky here, and it's only here that it becomes clear, and the knight on f7 is going. So yeah, as always, pretty tough. I don't know what the scores would be in human games to win this as white. Probably not that outstanding, I would have thought. But king h2, knight f8, king h3, bishop b2, and now f5. And once again the engines think, okay, black isn't anywhere close to getting this drawing formation, so it's safe to go for this win. And bishop f6, queen b3, queen b7. It's just all these checks somehow just just inexorably they seem to bring black into tricky positions. And here, of course, in this position, black is completely lost. And Leela ended up giving the bishop, and this didn't last long. So I thought that was a very interesting IQP position. As I said, it's not, black's play isn't really just about blockading the d pawn and then you're fine. It's about getting that light squared bishop active, and that light squared bishop activity that prevents white from playing plans involving a quick transfer of the rook along the third rank against the king, because if that happens, then that's pretty dangerous. And Leela didn't really get a grip of this one, I don't think. I think Stockfish's idea just to try and swap off some pieces, reduce that white attacking potential on the king side, was pretty good, I have to say. And I also thought that this idea that both Stockfish and Dragon were playing, just to give away the pawn and just say, okay, but at least I'm getting my light squared bishop in a good position, and there's no more attack for white. That was also pretty interesting and pretty impressive. Yeah, Leela's line was not great, allowing this bishop h7. I'm not quite sure what Leela missed. I mean, Leela will not have missed bishop h7, but will have, misevaluated, I suppose, one of the resulting positions. But this was a very nice attack from Torch. Quite slow build-up, but somehow, nothing that black can do. And the big problem is that in order to defend the king's position, Leela had to pack pieces around its king, which means no escape for this guy. And very, very nice play from Torch, I did very much like the way that that Torch played this this position, and in particular, the Tull material balance, queen against rook and two pieces, just really very, very impressive indeed. So there we are. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope that gave some more insight into these typical IQP positions. As I said, I'll probably end up doing some sort of series, maybe aimed at beginners or something like that. I'm not quite sure. I've got some ideas about it, but that'll be something that'll come later maybe. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. If you enjoyed it, why not give a like, subscribe to the channel, tell your friends about this channel. Have a look at Forward Chess. I'm author of the month in August, and the reductions will still be there, I think, well into the mid of September. So do take a look. It's a good price already on Forward Chess for my books, and $5 extra off, and a glorious way of reading the material, I think. So do take a look at that. And otherwise, thanks very much for watching. Keep the comments flowing, and hope to see you at the next videos. Thanks for watching.